Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks, Jeff.
So you get, so you get your own now, so Mike and I will show this. Yeah, you gotta talk into the mic. I hear you, kid. Mike, you got your count there? Just real quick. 5308 less 400.
$4,908,000.
Less 4080. Divided by 4080.
Oh, divided?
No, less 4080.
Right, that's 4.5 mil.
No. It goes 5308 minus 400. No, just forget the zeros. Forget that. Okay, 5308 minus 400.
The mic is super sensitive.
Thanks. That's okay. Thanks. 5308 minus 400. Good. Stay there. Take that number. Minus, you don't have to do it. Minus 4080. 4080. 4080 equals
828.
That's the increase. Now divide that by 4080. Divided by 4080. 20% increase when you factor that out. It's a 20% increase in their expenditure when you factor that. It's going to be maybe I'm going to be
Thank you.
It's good you got a percentage on it.
We love rock. So happy that I'm not. Yeah. All right, good evening, everyone. The public hearing on the budget is now back in session. Madam Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Councilman Ambrosino. Here. Councilman Blakeman. Here. Councilman Diaz-Bazito. I'm here. Councilman Dunn. Here. Councilwoman King Sweeney. Here. Senior Councilwoman Gooseby. Here. Supervisor Gillen.
Here. Madam Clerk, will you please call the first public hearing?
Proposed assessment roll, Greater Atlantic Beach Water Reclamation District for the fiscal year beginning January 1st, 2019.
I do not have any slips on this public hearing. Is there anyone who wanted to be heard on this? Hearing none, may I have a motion?
Yes, Supervisor. I move that the proposed assessment roll of the Greater Atlantic Beach Water Reclamation District for the fiscal year beginning January 1, 2019 be adopted.
Second. Madam Clerk?
Councilman Ambrosino. Aye. Councilman Blakeman.
Aye.
Councilman Diaz-Bazito.
Aye.
Councilman Dunn.
Aye.
Councilwoman King Sweeney. Senior Councilwoman Gooseby. Aye. Supervisor Gillen.
Aye. Madam Clerk, please call the second public hearing.
Preliminary budget, Town of Hempstead, for the fiscal year beginning January 1st, 2019.
I have a number of slips on this hearing. Valerie Lamp.
I left something. Can I just get it really quick? I was taking a picture. Is that
Yes.
okay? Sorry about that. I'm never the first speaker. I'm usually the last. Valerie Lamp Baldwin, as always, I like to start off my favorite quote. How you do anything is how you do everything. With regards to this budget, I wanted to thank the board and also our tax receiver, Donald Clavin, for working together in a bipartisan way to come up with the resolutions and the amendments, because this is the first time I can ever remember that we're going to have a tax cut. I think it's really exciting. I don't know why people or anyone is against it, but I'm just saying thank you. So let me start off with, a plus. As far as always, the animal shelter, all I can say is that, Supervisor Gillen, I saw your proposed budget for the marketing and advertising section of that budget, and knowing that the shelter has an over $4 million budget per year, to allocate only $500 is just nothing. I read your statement in Newsday saying that the reason was because the prior year was $500 and that they hadn't gone through all of that as of August. But to me, that is just a really inadequate argument, because first of all, if you're on a deserted island and you have 1 gallon of water and 1 chocolate bar and you're going to be there for a year, you're not going to devour your supplies instantly. You're going to ration that out. And so if they were to spend $500 in January, then that would have looked like irresponsible spending. So there was really no way to win. But more importantly, you ran and campaigned on the animal issues. You spoke about the abuse, the mismanagement, and the patronage jobs at the shelter, and you came across like a champion for the animals. I can guarantee you that if I were in your position, I would be fighting for and making the case for $100,000 a year for the marketing budget for the animals at the shelter. Right now, there's 500 animals plus within the animal shelter, not including the foster animals. That's an allocation on your proposed budget for only $1 per animal per year. You can't reconcile that to me. It's just unheard of. A $4+ million annual budget for any organization, entity, company, not-for-profit, foundation will have a much more significant budget. So I thank the board for allocating a proposed $10,000 a year. It's a start, and I'm not going to act like I'm completely happy with it. It could be more, but I do thank them for not accepting the measly $500 a year, which last year, Supervisor Gillen, I sat next to you in that pew back there for the last budget meeting where you poo-pooed the $500 a year and said that it might as well be nothing. So that's something that really I take exception to. Second of all, or third of all, wherever I am, the 2019 fiscal executive budget presentations. This mailer, from what I understand, was a taxpayer expense. Is that correct? This is billed to the taxpayer? Anyone? Yes? Yes? Nodding yes? Okay. Well, this mailer, from what I understand, according to your campaign videos last year when I was in lockstep with you, is between $35,000 and $100,000 billed to the taxpayer. That is a ludicrous amount. Let's call it on the lower conservative amount, $35,000, $40,000. I live in Baldwin. This mailer arrived at my house 4 hours after the start time of the last meeting that you were advertising. That is a complete waste of tax dollar money. It is a complete waste of materials and labor and everything and postage. And I'm just stunned that I think that, you know, we need to be able to collaborate collectively as a whole. I'm just stunned that you would even balk at what I believe the board's sound budget proposal is. And honestly, it doesn't matter. We don't need your vote, but I would hope you would vote in the right direction.
Thank you. Chris Wright? Good evening. If you would state your name and address for the record, please.
33 Rope Lane, Levittown. Councilman Dunn is my councilman. Supervisor Gillen represents me in her at-large capacity. Thank you. With thanks to the Levittown Tribune at Fred's Deli for reminding me that, you probably saw this too, right? That there's a budget and that I should read it. I just thought I'd have a few questions and a couple of comments. Should point out for the record, Kevin, that for the 5 years that I was the chairman of Nassau Off-Track Betting Corporation, Kevin Conroy was our controller. We worked well together. We produced profits and surcharges to the county that were paid in full and on time every year.
Thank you.
Something that doesn't necessarily happen
Thank you, Chris.
anymore. So it's good to see you again. What I would also point out is that in my other volunteer capacity, I'm a member of the board of NIFA. And of course, the NIFA statute doesn't apply to the town, but I think you can take some instruction from some of the lessons learned by the county. In particular, the idea that borrowing money is no way to balance a budget, that it's not sustainable. It isn't revenue because you have to pay it back. It also isn't revenue because it's borrowing, so that should be pretty obvious. And I think it's probably not lost on the two members of the town board who used to be members of the county legislature that that's probably no way to budget. And I'm a little concerned about some of the things I see in this budget. Not a lot. I have to be honest with you. It's a good thing to see the town board's conflict being over whether I get a $14 tax decrease or some other tax decrease. It's the only tax bill for me that's going to go down this year, putting aside a certiorari. The challenge that I have, and I wrote some notes here, is that the supervisor's budget, as I read it, and I did take the time to read it online, is balanced, it's thoughtful, and it's well prepared. And it gives me a $14 tax decrease from what I'm told. My concern is that, and a number of the amendments by the town board are also thorough and helpful and accretive to the county's fiscal condition. And you can see those. But they're also a mixed bag. I think where you've taken a tactic to using under a list of specified spending having a subtotal that says less unspecified savings. Now, I understand that you have a track record. I understand that you have some history. You can predict what the savings might be in some amount. But you also have a track record of that number being wrong a lot. And when it's been wrong, that's required borrowing.
I'm not sure that that's accurate. I would have the controller correct you.
Chris, less savings in the 18 budget was a combination.
We're talking about historically, Mr. Controller.
Yeah, just in general.
Okay. Prior to 18, less savings did not anticipate any avoided salary for retirees. It was all about chargebacks. What does that mean? You have an auditor who is budgeted out of the controller's office, but is working in a different location. Less savings is the mechanics to ensure that the proper department, and or in this case, the fund, is charged accordingly. So who gets the service pays for the service. Less savings was expanded in 2018. So because I had mentioned this at the afternoon session, there's a collective bargaining agreement that had an incentive for retirement that we thought, and we're getting a lot of feedback, there's a lot of enthusiasm for that. So we baked in the 2018 budget $12 million of less savings. Again, that less savings is avoided salary, so someone who is budgeted for the entire year is going to leave. We currently, we anticipated 100. There's 113 currently who have taken avail of themselves of that, and we're at 11,300,000 with a quarter of the year to go. So what we did is, all we did was, we have history. Seemingly in 18, the history is seeming to pan out pretty good. I think we're going to blow through $12 million. And what we did is we have introduced less savings in this regard, $8.5 million. And again, this incentive has the life of the collective bargaining agreement, which goes out for another 5 years.
But is that the net savings amount, net of all the payouts that the employees took when they were terminated?
No, that's strictly the voided salary.
Were the termination payments bonded?
No. We had bonded termination payments a few years back, one time and one time only, because of Nassau County, the garbage tax case judgment against the town of Hempstead for $25 million, which put us in a cash flow predicament. So we pretty much were forced to go out and bond that out. That's the only time we anticipated it, and collectively the only time we expect to do it prospectively.
Mr. Controller, just for clarification purposes, is it fair to say that the town board has not engaged in a shell game?
Absolutely not.
Thank you.
I think we've acted very responsibly.
I didn't use the term, did I?
The supervisor did. So since you're sharing her talking points, I just wanted to clarify prospectively.
I wrote notes on a pad.
Okay, go for it.
Mr. Wright, did I give you talking points this evening?
No.
Thank you.
We haven't spoken in months, I don't think. Yeah.
Thank you.
For the unwarranted.
You're welcome.
So just to be clear, Mr. Conroy, your answer was we did in fact bond on one occasion.
Yes, we bonded on one occasion, and again, I want to point out, we had a judgment, garbage tax judgment, Judge Morano, July of a few years back for $25 million. Had we not bonded out, we probably would not have met payroll. That was the reason for it.
Mr. Conroy, how long was that case going on for?
4 or 5 years?
Yeah, that was a situation, Mr. Wright, where there was this lawsuit, there was a judgment, it was for a lot of money, and certainly that was a circumstance where it would be prudent to bond that. And as we found out, by bonding it, it hasn't had a deleterious effect on our budget. But I do appreciate your comments about how you cannot fund a budget through borrowing, because that leads to a disaster. I'm well aware of it. As you know, I was presiding officer in Nassau County, and when I served with Dennis Dunn and my counsel was Ed Ambrosino, one of the things that we did was we tried to change that practice. And unfortunately, back then, the county charter didn't allow for the legislature to control the spending of the county executive. I'm happy to say, as you know, because you're a member of NIFA, that has changed, and the county legislature has much more control now than they did in the past over the spending of the county executive, which I think is a good thing. It should be decided by the legislature, as it is here in the town board.
And just since we brought up the garbage tax case, I just wanted to point out that that is a litigation that was settled before my tenure, but the utilities sued a number of municipalities The county and the town of Hempstead elected to settle that lawsuit while other municipalities did not, and the terms of that settlement required the town to pay everything in the judgment up front, while we had to borrow the money to pay that judgment, but yet the county has 10 years to pay us back with no interest, but we absorbed the interest for 10 years.
Were the amounts that were paid to the employees upon termination, which were not included in the budget, or then where are they included from an estimated purpose in this year's budget? What's the estimated amount of payouts that go with the termination savings in the 2019 budget?
About $3 million. The average payout's about $30,000 per employee. We anticipate 100 to go in this budget.
And how did that work out in 2018 year to date? Same thing, 11.3 million. What's the?
Roughly around the same number.
But but if it's not, was it in the budget though? That's the question. Is it budgeted in the departmental line items?
It's not directly budgeted as a particular line item, but there are other avenues in the budget where there are reserves set up so as to accommodate that.
See, that's not a shell game, and I wasn't suggesting that there was one. My concern is that you have unbudgeted expenses that go with budgeted savings. And what I'm suggesting to the town board is that you have a baseline budget that cuts taxes. You have a number of good amendments that are accretive to the town's budgetary situation. And you have an opportunity here to do something for the town as opposed to your team by making the amendments that are only.
What do you mean our team? Can you clarify what you're suggesting?
What I'm seeing here, what I've seen in public discourse, is that it's our budget or your budget, and no.
No, it's actually a bipartisan budget. So what do you mean by team?
The town supervisor and the rest of the town board.
Well, there's 6 of us, and it's a bipartisan budget. So what do you mean by team?
I just said that. I just told you what I meant by that.
Okay, so 6
There's
people, bipartisan.
There's a vote for my budget and a vote for my budget, and there's.
I think you're infusing politics into this conversation.
Oddly enough, what I'm suggesting is that
Isn't that the normal and natural tension that exists in every government? The chief executive, they have a responsibility to propose a budget, and then the legislative branch, or in this case, the town board, reviews it, makes changes where they think is appropriate. I don't think that there's anything that was done to be malicious or to do anything that would be deleterious to the town. In the opposite of that, isn't it a fact that we are cutting taxes, that we have reduced the supervisor's spending by not a great amount? Nobody on this board said that her budget was a bad budget. What we said is we thought we could produce a little better budget. We think we have a little better budget. Wouldn't you agree that in regards to budgeting purposes, this is a pretty good budget, the one that's being proposed? Wouldn't you agree with that, Mr. Wright?
I'm not sure that I agree with that entirely, which is why I suggested that some of the amendments, such as bringing the legal expenses in-house, great idea, but some of them were, estimating savings which may or may not take place, which put you in the position of potentially having to borrow, and increasing expenditures in other places and estimating streams of income, and for example, on parks that may or may not be achievable. And in our world in the county, we deal with worried about risks, what might or might not happen, the good and the bad. And so,
In the budget that we're proposing, are there enough savings in that budget to accommodate any accrued sick or vacation time?
Yes, there are.
And was it ever contemplated that we would borrow for any of that accrued sick or vacation time, as Mr. Wright is imputing to it?
Never. And if,
On borrowing, that is a practice that we do not condone.
and for the
Correct.
record, I didn't impute
Correct.
that you were planning on it. I imputed that if there's a risk that you might have to.
No risk at all.
I would say, if I could add to that, Chris, we have a very healthy fund balance. Our fund balance is almost to the level of the town board's policy of 4 months of your expenditure budget. Our fund balance is over $100 million. So in the event we fall short, and I don't think we're going to fall short, but if we do, we can resort to that fund balance. We don't anticipate it, but we are very, very
How much
far.
is the fund balance right now, Mr. Conroy? Would you let everyone know that?
Yeah, I have it right. Just give me 1 second.
It's substantially the same as the supervisor's fund balance?
We closed out, and this is an audited number. We closed out 2017 with a fund balance of $117 million. The projection for 18 is to add $26.9 million. Closing out 18 on a projected basis is $143.8 million in fund balance.
Mr. Conroy, if I may, with the budget that the town board has proposed that we're discussing now, do we add fund balance in 2019?
Yes, we had $8.4 million, which was the number in the tentative budget and remains the same in the preliminary budget that we're now discussing.
Thank you.
How is fund balance added with a balanced but not surplus budget? Is it through borrowed funds?
No, absolutely not.
I don't know how you add to the, okay. Well, allow me to say that when I came up here to speak, I was planning on suggesting that I would hope the town board would consider the best of the amendments and forsake those that don't necessarily work and produce a budget that's builds on the town supervisor's budget, but does so prudently and in a way that those savings are achievable so that we don't have the risk of funding a tax cut with borrowing, which is what I came up here to say.
Reasonable minds can differ.
You don't think that's what I came up here to say?
No, I
Okay.
appreciate it.
That's what I came up here to say, so thank you.
Thank you.
Have a good evening.
Thank you. Diane Madden?
Diane Madden, Hempstead. I as well wanted to thank the board for the increase in the advertising for the animal shelter. The animals, they certainly can use as much promotion as possible. And yeah, I think if I recall correctly, the most the budget has ever been, from again what I recall, is about $2,500. It was reduced under Pistori. So again, I do thank you for that. You know, I did have a couple of questions, but I want to point out that when you do have the right leadership at an animal shelter, for instance, I know animal shelters that are barely getting by in the southern states and under tents that operate better because of a philosophy. So it's not always about money. It's about a philosophy. And with that balance that I believe is left over from the $500 from 2018, I urge the board to consider boosting the post for the assistant director. And I truly have faith that each of you will consider the person that will be applying and that person's philosophy and background. I did have some questions about the budget regarding the behavior contract, which I'm hopeful will be expiring and we'll be moving on to hiring a real qualified trainer in the future to maintain these animals as they wait for homes. But where can I find that contract? I'm assuming it's not in this particular budget. Where does that money come from?
Mr. Controller, can you answer the question, please?
It's in the budget. It's on page 55, and it's the account 4151, fees and services. Now, the actual contract, we don't have that handy, but in terms of where the money is going to be dispersed from, that's the account, and that is in this budget it's set at $400,000.
So what else would that include then, aside from, obviously, $400,000 is way over the amount of a salary for a trainer? What other items would that, just a general idea, would that be part of TNR or?
Yeah, we have Dr. Singh in there. We have the behaviorist, as you mentioned, the crematory, and the animal hospital.
Okay. The animal hospital meaning contracts for medical?
Outside, yes, outside
Okay,
medical.
thank you. So again, you know, I thank the board for this advertising. I urge you to use whatever balance, I'm not quite sure what that balance is, of the $500 to boost this post about the assistant director, and continue to get the shelter on the right track. And again, thank you for working together, your collaboration. As far as you go, Laura Gillen, I was kind of set back when you made that comment. Someone was up here making a comment about, you know, talking about patronage jobs, and we basically said, well, which side? Because you fiercely criticized Santino for his patronage hiring, and you duplicated everything you fiercely criticized him for. And when we all asked for apologies, including Councilman Dunn, Valerie, Bonnie Radafshar, who is panic-stricken that because of you, she will lose her job, you probably owe Santino the biggest apology. Good night.
Matt Malin? right. Matt Malin. Helene Mana?
Hi, my name is Helene Manis from Merrick. I have a few questions. I'm just going to list the questions first, and then you could give me the answers of all of them together, okay? It has to do with the amendments from the council people. Please explain what less savings means in the budget. Is less savings a generally accepted accounting principle? Does any other municipality in New York State use less savings in their budget? What formula did you use to come up with $4,016,691 of less savings of park department salaries? How many employees do you anticipate retiring townwide in 2019? Historically, how many Town of Hempstead employees have retired from the town without a retirement incentive? On average, what does a retiring employee receive in a payout of unused vacation and sick days? How much do you think the Town of Hempstead will pay out in unused vacation and sick days if 100 employees retire? And what have you budgeted in 2019 for payouts of unused vacation and sick days? That's it.
I don't know if anybody can remember all those questions. So,
Should I go over it one at a time?
Well, I think yeah, Mr. Conroy, I think if the question is going to continue to explain less savings, maybe we can give one big explanation.
I disagree. Everybody has the right to ask whatever question they want.
I didn't say they couldn't ask. I was just asking if Mr. Conroy can give us an explanation so everyone here could hear it.
That's exactly what I think the speaker wants. So, why don't you start with your first one or two questions, and Mr. Conroy can answer them. Just repeat them for Mr. Conroy.
Okay. Please explain what less savings means in the budget, and is less savings a generally accepted accounting principle?
Well, the second half of your question, generally accepted accounting principle, I believe has no bearing on this. This is nothing more than a budgetary projection. The first part of your question, less savings, the definition as it relates to this budget is that there is currently an incentive that we feel, a retirement incentive that we feel is quite attractive. There's a lot of interest in this. The budgets for all full-time positions for the entire year. We believe that there's going to be a number that will go, something rivaling 100, and they'll go during the course of the year, which means we've budgeted for all these employees for the full year, yet they're going to leave sometime during the year, which means we're going to save, or in this case, avoid salary. We anticipate and project to avoid salary to the tune of $8.5 million.
How much would you have to pay them, though, of unused sick days and vacation?
Generally speaking, on average, our data, historical data, it's been about $30,000 per employee. So if 100 go, about $3 million.
And what was the first number you said? I forgot.
$8.5 million in avoided salary that is in this budget for the full year.
And the people that are retiring, you don't replace?
Well, I can speak for the prior administration. On an exception basis, there was no anticipation of, other than on an exception basis, not to replace. On an exception basis, we would replace, and only based upon need.
So if it turns out that you have to replace a certain number of those people, then the savings wouldn't be as much as you anticipate.
It all depends. I mean, if you're going to replace someone from a vacated position, for example, a deputy now fills another position, you don't replace the deputy position. There's a wash situation there. But our experience has been that less savings in 2018 was $12 million, and we're at $11.3 million right now in less savings. So the history has been we have met our expectations, and we fully expect to do the same in this budget.
What about the history in 2017, Mr. Controller?
2017 less savings had nothing to do with avoided salary. It was all about departmental chargebacks.
But
But
it was not achieved, isn't that correct?
It was achieved because it's a wash in the budget. As an example, Supervisor, let me please explain. In the controller's office, you may have a budgeted line item for an auditor, and let's assume it's $50,000. The location of that employee during the course of the year is not in the controller's office. They may have been dispatched, in this case, to urban renewal and working as an accountant or an auditor in urban renewal. So theoretically, the budgeted position in the controller's office is not getting the benefit of the services of that employee. So what we do is up top, we've got $50,000 budgeted as an auditor, and down below, a negative $50,000 in less savings so as to neutralize, or in this case, nullify the actual charge to the controller's office. Less savings in urban renewal would be a positive $50,000 so as to appropriately charge urban renewal for said salary of said employee. That's the example. And in 17 and prior years, exclusively, that's what less savings was about. It had nothing to do with incentive and avoided salary as per retirements.
Ms. Smith, excuse me, I'm speaking. You can ask to, I control the meeting. You can ask me to speak. I'd be happy to let you speak, but I'm speaking to Ms. Smith. Ms. Smith, do the audited financials from 2017 show that there was a projected savings and that those savings were not met?
The adjustment which was put before. Hello? It's on? Great. The 2017 adjustments to payroll was $13 million. Again, Mr. Conroy is attempting to explain the less savings, and we've had this conversation. In the budget, there is an amount that's recorded as an adjustment. The net of that, in the 18 budget, we could look at the 18 budget and have a feel for what that less savings number is. When I met with Mr. Conroy to ask, how does the less savings where someone is working in one department but another department is absorbing the cost, which is what was just explained as the basis for less savings, that should be a wash. The 2018 budget shows less savings of 12, and that adjustment to other departments was $3 million. Am I correct?
Subject to check. No, I don't believe you are, but continue. Mike, would you please, you can add in?
Yeah, it was $3 million because there was an accrual for the first time made by the auditors for a prior period retirement that was paid in the current year. If you go back to 17, you'll have the same issue. However, the auditors did not pick it up in that time period. And in the year 2016, there were two incentives. That was the reason why we had to bond the $8.5 million out that you keep referring to in the 2017 financials.
Okay, I'm not referring to something that did not occur. There was borrowing for the payouts, correct?
Correct.
Okay, so that's clear. Now, that means it was not anticipated because you knew this incentive was
No, we
there.
did not know this incentive at the time that the 2017 budget was contemplated. There was no incentive at that time when we prepared the budget. That was subsequent.
So it was not prudent then to have a credit, whether it's called left savings or anything else, that would reduce that number, the payroll number, that had no supporting documentation. Because what I did is I went back to 2001 to see how much the less savings were year by year.
Mm-hmm.
And on average, there were 2 million, 2.5, 3 million, 3.5, and then you get to 2017, and it's 13 million. And you get to 2018, because a comment was made, let's look at the history. I looked at the history, and that's the reason the supervisor is uncomfortable with the number. Given that you did not meet that credit in 2017 and borrowed for that, is it prudent to put that high of a number in 2019?
And to be clear, Mr. Controller, Mr. Capianco, that was not prepared included in our tentative budget. You did not include that in our tentative budget. Isn't that right? Councilman Ambrosino, if you'd like to ask your question, please go ahead.
First, I don't need your permission to ask a question. I'm an elected official, but thank you, Supervisor, for your courtesy. Mr. Conroy, isn't it disingenuous for the supervisor and her budget director to say that the methodology prior to 18 can be compared to the methodology used in 18 because there was a fundamental change in the way we do our books, and the application of a prior period adjustment to 17 was not done prior to 17 because the auditor didn't pick it up. Therefore, the methodology in 18 is completely different from the methodology used in 17, 16, 15, and 14 because the methodology is now different. So it's comparing apples and oranges, the way we use less savings for the 18 budget versus the way we use less savings in the 17 budget. Isn't that accurate?
That is accurate, and if I may.
Mr. Conroy, just 1 second. So therefore, any further questions, it didn't happen in 17, didn't have nothing to do with each other. 17 is different from 18 because there were two different methodologies used, and we did achieve the savings in 18, and we are on track to achieve those savings, and we are copying 18 going forward.
Well,
so
I'd be
that comparing 2017 and before is in this disingenuous political ploy of the supervisor to cast aspersions on what we're doing now.
I would be curious to see the methodology because it was never shared with my office. So, Mr. Conroy, do you have any calculations of the methodology that was used in the 76 amendments to come up with these less savings?
That's what, I'm sorry, Supervisor.
I'm talking about the 2019 budget, which is what we're discussing today. And the councilman just said that they used a complicated methodology to come up with those projected savings.
I didn't say that at all.
I've never seen that.
Absolutely did not say.
Oh, my mistake then. Was there any methodology? Was any?
What I said, and do not misquote me, Madam Supervisor. What I said, Mr. Conroy, was that in 2018, we achieved less savings because of the methodology employed. And then we're using the same methodology going forward. We are on track to achieve that in 18, 19, and going forward. In 17, a completely different methodology was used. Therefore, it is entirely disingenuous, a lie, and a political ploy to use 17 versus 18. Is that accurate, Mr. Conroy?
In so many words, the 18 methodology introduced for the first time less savings as it relates, again, I'm going to say this again, to the incentive that we felt, and as the record will show, we were right on, that there would be a great interest because of the collective bargaining agreement and the medical incentive to get off the payroll. That's the first time it was introduced.
I do apologize, Councilman, if I misunderstood you. I thought you were talking about a methodology that was used to calculate the less savings that are part of the 2019 budget. So I do apologize if I misunderstood you. And I'm curious, was there any methodology used? And if there was, could you please provide me with a copy of it? Because I don't understand how these less savings were calculated.
We can explain it to you after the meeting, Supervisor.
Is there any kind of calculation in writing? Is there any kind of calculation in writing?
I have a question, Supervisor. May I ask a question?
Yes, of course, Mr.
Thank you for your patience. You brought up a lot of important subjects. I'm curious, and I think I know the answer, but I'd like to hear it from the professionals. All three of you, I'd like to hear it. If, in fact, we were to adopt the tentative budget proposed by the supervisor that did not have the item in there for anticipated savings on reduction of headcount due to attrition, that's what it is, isn't it?
Correct.
Okay. If we didn't do that, but the pattern followed in 2019 that existed in 2018, what would happen if the 100 people did separate their employment from the township? What would happen with respect to the budget?
We simply would have over-budgeted our full-time salary line.
We would have over-budgeted approximately $8 million. Is that correct?
Assuming this number is correct.
We would have taken that money from the taxpayers to fund what was an unnecessary item in the budget because, based on historical data, we knew that we were going to have a a range of the number of people who were going to separate their employment for various reasons, but mostly for retirement, that they were going to separate their employment from the town and our head count would be reduced. Is that correct?
Correct.
That's all this is.
Question about
What
that?
it is.
Can I ask a question about that? Okay. If, let's say, you have an over amount of money, let's say you have $8 million, don't you think your taxpayers would be thrilled if you sent us checks?
That's what we're doing. We're reducing.
Well, no, I'm saying if you don't put in this less savings, because you never know what's going to be, and you account that the people continue to work, and you end up with $8 million extra, do you think your taxpayers would complain if you sent us each a check and divided it equally?
We are not permitted to do that, ma'am, because people pay unequal amounts of taxes, and to do that, I think, would very much be unfair to people. They pay their taxes, and whatever percent, we reduce the amount. We don't share it equally. There, you know.
But you couldn't figure out a percentage so that each person could get money back?
We have figured that out. It's called a tax cut.
We're not asking you to pay it now. We're giving it the money now as opposed to you having to wait.
You don't have to pay it.
Well, I just believe that this less savings is funny accounting. If NIFA was in charge of you, would they allow you to do this?
NIFA isn't in charge of us because we have good budgeting practices, unlike what transpired in the county for many, many years.
And is does any other does any other municipality in New York State use less savings in their budget?
I have no idea of that. I don't know. I'm sure you could Google their budgets to see if it's there, but we have no knowledge of that.
Okay, thank you.
Supervisor, may I comment?
Yes, Ms. Smith.
Mr. Conroy explained that they're on track to meet 11 million this year. Some of the assumptions are completely false. The avoided salary, and I apologize for using names, but I must in order to make the point. The avoided salary for an employee from the supervisor, this is part of the 11 million. I don't want to use all of the names. And the latest update I have was in May, and it was 9 million. The employee listed here is David Levy. That employee, to my knowledge, was replaced by someone in the supervisor's office. I don't know exactly which body, but how could you count someone who's been replaced in January? How could you count avoided salaries there? In addition, that employee, the payout for that employee was 1.5 times what that base pay was. You're paying out 1.5 times the base pay, probably sometime in January. You brought someone else on in January at the full-time pay. I don't understand how you count this in the 11 million. I don't, and it's the reason it's uncomfortable. Mr. Conroy and I have had this conversation. It doesn't work. You can't pretend you don't have to pay out employees who are allowed to carry 100 days by contract. In some cases, special arrangements are made, and there are folks with a lot of days. It's not that they are not entitled to it. I've worked with Mike. Mike works all the time. If he has time that is beyond what the union permits, he's very much entitled to it, because this budget wouldn't be done without him being here. So I understand why sometimes people are allowed to carry their days. That has to be figured, and I have not seen many 30,000 payouts. I have the numbers. I don't want to discuss, any other employees, but there are other employees from the supervisor's office. I'm not familiar with everyone, but I think I should ask Mr. Conroy, I don't know if he knows the answer, of the 130 13 employees, how many were replaced? Because I pointed out maybe 3 that I could clearly see were replaced.
The 18 budget. The prior supervisor, Anthony Santino, and I sat down, and he committed to me that of the retirees, on an exception basis, we will not replace, we will fill from within. Dave Levy is an exception. Dave Levy was a very high-paid employee, counsel to the supervisor. When he left, to just focus on his payout, and by the way, his payout was significant because he was able to exceed his banks because over his tenure with the town of Hempstead, he oftentimes was not allowed or was not approved for vacation. So in our math and our analysis, on it, we look at averages, and the average payout of those employees is, like I mentioned earlier, $30,000.
Does that include Mr. Levy?
He would be in that, correct.
So is there enough money in the 19 budget for accrued sick and vacation?
There is, and basically it's in the form of vacancies that have been budgeted for. I have some data here. Do you have it, Mike? I got it somewhere. Subject to check. I have it in front of me, but there it is. There are 53 vacancies in this budget. We have to hire, under the TOSNA litigation, 30 a year. In this budget, we're calling for 8 positions to be filled that are currently vacant. So the total of those dollars, assuming everybody gets hired early in January, is $1.3 million. The vacancies are worth $3.1 million. So therefore, we have a cushion of about 1.8. That would accommodate a good portion of the vacation and sick of these employees. We'd have to find probably somewhere in the neighborhood of about $1.2 million if these averages stand up. And we could easily find $1.2 million because as you go back and look at our budget, as recognized by Moody's and S&P, our budgeting practices are very conservative. What that means is we have positive variances. And what that means is on the expense line item, you budgeted X, you end up with Y. Y is generally less than X. On the revenue sideline, you budget X and you end up with Y. Y is greater. So that's why if you look at our fund balance restoration over the last few years, we've budgeted a conservative number. We have blown through that. We have done very, very well in that regard. So I'm confident that the 30,000 or the 30,000 per 100 that go out the door is going to cost the town about $3 million. Vacancies will take care of 2/3 of that, and positive variances, when we close the books out, will take care of the rest of that.
And if I may, if we're going to use Mr. Levy as an example, from what I remember, Mr. Levy was assigned to the supervisor's office.
Counsel to the supervisor.
Correct. So when he retired, it was replaced by the current supervisor.
Correct.
Thank you.
There is no avoided salary, was my point. It's being counted in the 11 million.
Do you suggest that we eliminate from the budget the position of counsel to the supervisor in order to achieve that savings?
Less savings. We're speaking about the less savings and the budgeting for, the budgeting for less savings and the prudence of, or the prudence, I guess would be the right word, of saying that it's avoided salary when in fact, I don't dare to tell the board what to do. However,
No, but you're
I think what Ms. Smith is suggesting is that it's a salary that's going to be incurred because, of course, the supervisor is going to have counsel,
Right.
regardless of who the supervisor is.
correct.
correct. So counting that as
So you're not suggesting we eliminate that?
counting that as avoided salary would be inappropriate.
Thank you.
But I don't think Mr. Conroy was counting Mr. Levy's salary as avoided salary.
It's on that list. It's on the.
But were you suggesting that was toward the 11 million?
No, not at all. The
Right.
11 million is on average, again.
He was eligible to retire, he retired, that's a fact, but you're not suggesting that he was part of that 11 million that you're citing, because Ms. Smith said that you were pretending when it came to the numbers. Are you in fact pretending, or are what you're telling us accurate?
He is part of the 11 million.
Okay.
He is, absolutely, yeah. And Ms. Smith has, on 5 different occasions by way of email, and I believe you got them all today, that we have kept her up to date as to the progress of where we stand, 12 million budgeted versus actual. We've been very forthright in that regard. And I want to point out, too, when we started out this whole budgetary process, Mike and I, with the first meeting, we were given the directive, no less savings. And the board, I believe, has now considered it, and seemingly it's the fiscally, in my opinion, the fiscally responsible thing to do. We've done it in the 18 budget, and we are going to meet that projection.
With certainty, there's no pretending.
I don't pretend, Councilman.
Okay, I didn't think so.
These are numbers, and numbers do not lie.
Mr. Conroy, just to repeat an earlier question, in this budget, in the 2019 budget, there is enough money in that budget to account and pay for accrued sick and vacation pay without the necessity of going to the market for bonds if we were allowed to do that.
Absolutely. We're projecting that of the 100 that leave under the less savings scenario, it's going to cost the town $3 million, and I call it entitlement pay. That would be vacation and sick.
And the entitlement pay is baked into the budget.
It's baked, the funds available to pay that are baked into the budget to the extent of 2/3 of that number in the vacancies.
Terrific. Thank you, Mr. Conroy.
You're welcome.
Could I just ask one question? Do you have a guarantee from those 100 employees that they are going to retire?
There is no guarantees, no. This budget is a projection. It's a projection.
So if by chance your projection is wrong, then there won't be enough money to cover everything.
Our projections may be wrong 2 ways. We may be too light on the $8.5 million. Our savings may be something significantly greater than that. Like I said early on, this incentive, the retiree incentive, we are getting an overwhelming response that this is very attractive, and many people are on the fence about going. My colleague next to me over here has got 25 years. He's got his thumb on the situation. He can refer to it. And this gentleman next to me, this incentive, the $12 million that we talked about, it wasn't my brainstorm, it was this guy, and he's right on the money, and I have every bit of confidence to believe it, and I think it's the prudent fiscal thing to do.
Mr. Conroy, just for purposes of clarification, though, you're not assuming at all that all eligible employees retire. You are already discounting.
Correct.
Yeah. So look, can you explain that a little bit? Because I think there could be some confusion.
In that regard, the board hired a consultant to do the analysis,
Right.
an independent consultant. This gentleman was the former controller for, I believe, over 20 years. And he came up with the analysis, and we've had discussions about it, and I agree with his findings.
And
So to be clear, Mr. Conroy, you did not come up with the projections for this less savings, is that correct?
The budgetary consultant to the town board did. I discussed it with him, and I agree with him.
And when did you discuss it with him?
Oh, a couple of weeks back. Right after the 15th meeting, we had a conversation. After, for the first time, Mike Capianco, learned of the town board resolutions and the adjustment to the tentative budget to arrive at the preliminary budget.
It was after the tentative budget was prepared, is that correct?
It was, yes, correct.
Thank you.
I have a question. As far as the thousands are concerned, all of those people that would have to be made whole, at the end of the year, where's that money in the budget?
It's budgeted in the vacancies, Councilwoman. There are 53 vacancies, of which 30 of those vacancies are spoken for to meet the obligation of the TOSNA list.
Is that in the back of the budget? Is it the beginning of the year or the end of the year?
No, it's in the budget throughout the budget. Most of those hirings are going to be in sanitation, and the other good portion are going to be in highway. So if you look at those budgets for both sanitation and highway, I can identify for you all of those vacancies that are spoken for the TOSNA.
And ma'am, if I may, I know one of your questions to the controller are there going to be 100 people exactly that retire? Mr. Conroy specified that obviously budgets are projections. And there's other parts of the budgets that are projections as well, just like we project how much snow we're going to get. Nobody up here is able to identify how much snow this winter we're going to get. So we base it on what we've done last year and the year before, and we hope for the best. We may project short, we may project over. So, I mean, the budget does contain projections. It's not an exact science.
Thank you.
I have one question of Mr. Conroy. Mr. Conroy, you've been doing this a long time, and I'll pose it to you and Mr. Capabianco. Is there anything in this budget, absent something that was catastrophic to the whole region, that would jeopardize the fiscal integrity of the town in the year 2019?
Not that I see at all. What I was concerned about with, and Mike and I were concerned about with the town board resolution, where there were some cuts made to the tune of $12 million. 8.5 we already spoken about. I think we beat it to death on less savings. The remainder, $3 million and change, what I was concerned about, those would be cuts that were in the nature of contractual obligations of the town of Hempstead. I would have been opposed to that. Also, what I was concerned about is the town spends a lot to meet the requirements of the regulatory authorities, the health department, the DEC, and if there were cuts in that regard, we would have been opposed to that as well. In looking at this, there are no cuts in that regard whatsoever. So I see nothing, to meet your question, I see nothing in that regard. I think it's a prudent and fiscally sound budget.
Thank you.
Felix Procacci.
Felix Procacci, 1165 Barn Street, Franklin Square, New York. First, so everyone knows, the presiding officer is the one who runs the meeting, and according to the rules, unless you want to break the rules, you're supposed to ask her permission before you speak. Just the rules, you could change those rules, but Robert Rules of Order says it that way.
Thank you, Mr. Procacci.
On the audited employee levels, going back the last 5 years, because that's what I heard, that we used a 5-year average, essentially, to save time, we went down 250 employees over the last 5 years. I don't have all of them because I think there was a mistake in one of them. So, but it was essentially 255 employees. That's average of 50 per year. As you go down, of course, unless they really don't, the people really have no jobs, then it becomes harder to cut further down. We're at the current, as far as I got 25 years of audits on my website from 1993. This is the lowest level we've ever been. So context is important. Between 2015 and 2017, we added 200 retired employees. The new audits we use have retired employees, which is nice. So it went from 2173 to 2373. So we added 200 retired employees, but we only removed 155 active employees over that same period, according to the audits. Just some background. I would like to ask the board, and you could answer this at the end and discuss it later, just mull it over, but would the board agree to a resolution that required putting all the retirees' salary and title and the amount of payout on the resolutions that we get at each meeting so people could track and see how the retirements pan against what our projected numbers are? And like I said, I put this forward in a general sense that we should have resolutions when budgets are changed, and this would just really quantify it for residents so they could look at the website and actually see how the budgeted projections are actually panning out in reality. Okay, on the question, on each councilmatic district, there's a line item called salary adjustments. What is that for?
Mr. Conroy?
That would be for any salary adjustments during the course of the year in the form of raises, or someone's a trainee, and there's the steps and the like. So it would be a compensation adjustment.
Okay. Like raises and stuff like that, right?
As I
or
mentioned.
new hires. When drafts of the amendments to the tentative budget were first given, when were the drafts of the amendments to the tentative budget first given to the town board members?
I first received the 76 changes to the tentative budget at the dais at the hearing.
Okay. When did everybody else get it?
Excuse me, what did you ask? What was your question?
When did you get all the 76 amendments?
The Friday, the amendments from us?
Yeah, from the whoever made it up, John Mascherone, whatever the guy's name is.
Can I go through the timeline with you, Felix? Yeah, so here's the timeline. The Friday before the budget hearing, the first budget hearing, the supervisor put, I believe online, her tentative budget. So it gave the board approximately one business day to digest all of that. And if you work like me over the weekend, like I think most members of the town board do, if not all of us, gave us 4 days to digest that budget. We proposed amendments that were presented at that meeting to the supervisor and the other members of the town board. And those amendments were items that we've had from that date. What was that date? Was that the 3rd of October?
As I recall, the tentative budget was filed on September 28th, at which time immediately after filing it, I provided a copy to every single member of the town council. I also invited them to be a part of the process throughout the summer while we were preparing the budget. I provided them with a copy of the budget immediately. At the October 3rd hearing, I think was that when we got the 76 amendments?
October 15th.
That was the October 15th. Yes, that's right. At the October 3rd meeting is when we called the special meeting. So on the October 3rd meeting, the town board called for a special meeting to discuss whether or not they were going to adopt or ripen the tentative budget into the preliminary budget. So from October 3rd to October 15th, I did reach out to the town council and put forward certain amendments for things that needed to be added to the tentative budget, like the EMTs, which were being changed under the budget line from one department to the other. They didn't make it into the budget. That was just an error. So I let them know that there are 3 things or 4 things that I was going to add to the tentative budget, and I asked them for any comments or any other concerns. On the October 15th special meeting, that was the first time I was presented with the 76 amendments. And Mr. Conroy, I believe you said that was the first time you saw the 76 amendments. Is that correct?
As per the October 15 meeting, correct.
Thank you. I can't speak for the other board members.
Yeah, so Supervisor, the point I'm trying to make is that the Friday before the October 3rd meeting, we received the budget. And in analyzing that budget, there was a determination made that we would want to make some changes, some that we agreed on, such as the independent
Compliance officer.
right, the compliance officer and the EMTs were 2 of the things that we agreed upon. So we realized at that point that there were changes that were going to be made. We made those changes from that date. We sat down with our own advisor, Mr. Massimino, who's here tonight. It was the first time that Mr. Conroy had seen it because the board members felt that it would be a disservice to you and a conflict of interest if we were working with the controller while the controller was working with you. And that's why Mr. Massimino was retained by us, so that there would be no conflict of interest, that he would be able to prepare the supervisor's budget the way the supervisor wanted it. So we had no contact with Mr. Conroy at all with respect to that. Mr. Massimino sat down with us in numerous meetings, and at those meetings, we made value judgments with respect to the changes that we wanted to make with the budget. And your staff and you have had 15 days to review those changes. And that's where we are today on whether or not we're going to adopt or change that budget. So the fact of the matter is there was the same amount of time, actually more time, given to the supervisor's staff than the town board staff with respect to the information that was received and when it was received. And I want to make this absolutely clear. I am not criticizing the supervisor in any way, shape, or form. She adhered to all the rules and regulations of when the material was to be delivered to us. As a matter of fact, I think you were early on that. So I want to thank you for that. So I don't think there was any skullduggery on either side. It was just a process that we went through to prepare what we all felt was the best budget. And that was the timeline, and that's what occurred.
Can you answer the question now?
I just want to say thank you. Hold on one second, Mr. Procaci. I just want to thank you, Councilman Blakeman, for that explanation. I appreciate that insight. I do want to add that I did have some additional amendments to this preliminary budget that I proposed, but those negotiations were not successful. And I guess what it comes down to is just a different philosophy of the way to prepare the budget, because my philosophy is that we shouldn't be working in separate camps, that we should be working collaboratively throughout the whole budget process. That's why I invited the town board members in July to participate, because I didn't want to create a budget. I didn't want to say I'm the supervisor, so it's my budget and it's just my budget. I wanted it to be everybody's budget, and I invited everybody to be a part of it, and the controller should have been a part of it, and he should have been a part of these discussions, and that was my philosophy going into it, and I'm just disappointed that that's not the way it played out.
So, Supervisor, is it also your philosophy when you mischaracterized the text that you sent me and had a surprise press conference, and John Asbury from Newsday is my witness, was in my office when this happened, that I simply responded to a text of yours. You then had a surprise press conference the next morning, submitted a memo that was given to me after the press conference and said, based on our discussions last night, and I will actually read out these texts the text that you sent me, my response to it. Here are my amendments. We had no conversation. You had set me up for that to suggest that there was a conversation between the two of us. The previous Friday, despite the fact that you trashed me all weekend on Facebook, I sent a very courteous memo to you. And Alex, please, if you can pull that up so I can read that. It couldn't have been a nicer memo saying, I'm delighted to meet with you. Thank you for your work on this budget. And there was no response. So I think the outrage needs to be kept to a minimum, and we need to share the actual facts of what happened.
And I'm just wondering, is part of that collaboration and working with the town board and putting the budget together, was part of that telling the Herald how corrupt we all are?
So I'd be happy to share all the documents about my outreach to the town board, and the documents can speak for themselves.
And mischaracterization of our, quote, discussion that you felt it was appropriate to share a memo during a surprise press conference, and I was with John Asbury after the press conference only, that I then got the memo. How about that?
I think that I was hopeful that we would have a discussion and that we could talk about working together to try to see, because I thought there were some good things in your amendments. I thought
Was there a
opening up the
two-line
Veterans
text?
Office
That
of
was the
Public Affairs was a great thing. We agreed on the compliance officer. There were some great things that you added to the budget, and I was happy to talk about working with them. I said the one thing I couldn't deal with was less savings, because I don't think it's an honest budgetary practice.
The press conference was a setup, and Newsday saw the whole thing unfold.
I announced what my proposed amendments are going to be. I don't think there's
Based on the
any surprise
discussion
about
that we had the previous night, there was no discussion. It was disingenuous.
It was, let's get together and try to discuss working together collaboratively.
And I
you
said, please
yes.
share your amendments.
And you said yes. And
I
thought
said,
that
please
was
share
great.
your,
I thought it
and
was
so
a
then
great
that
step forward.
prompted a surprise press conference with a memo that was sent to me that I never received, based on our discussion last night.
I thought you did receive the memo, but we can check that. I think it went through email.
Actually, Alex is right here. John Asbury is right here from Newsday. John, is it true that I was handed the memo while you were sitting in my office after the press conference? Yeah. Fairly shocked, right? And I read you the text that constituted a discussion. Under even the broadest definition of discussion, that would not meet the definition of discussion. So, as I said, let's limit the outrage to a minimum and talk about the facts.
Ma'am, I'm sorry, you can't call out from the audience.
We're willing at every point to meet and to discuss. I mean, I sent a memo last Friday saying I'm happy to discuss, I'm happy to meet.
Ma'am, I'm so sorry, you cannot yell out from the audience. You cannot yell out from the audience.
We were provided with the budget on a Friday evening. We had our meeting was on Tuesday or Wednesday, and we had amendments to it, and then followed as 15 days.
Mr. Procaci, what was the question that you wanted answered? Ma'am, if you call out one more time, you're going to have to leave. I'm sorry. Mr. Procacci, what was the question that you had pending?
When did the board receive those tentative, those adjustments, those modifications to the original tentative budget? But when did you see them? But what day did you get them? Yes, the board. I understand. So you saw them prior to the 15th.
They were drafted in my dining room.
Okay, so you all saw them prior to the 15th.
They're our amendments.
I understand. I'm getting to that point. Now, they're your amendments, and by state law, you used to provide them to the public prior to the meeting, and you didn't do that. New York State, I repeat this law maybe 100 times here, and it just goes, boom. You don't comply with state law in the open meetings law.
Let's stop the allegations. Felix, this is getting tiring. Mr. Town Attorney, can you please confirm for us that we, in fact, complied with state law? I mean, I really want to limit the character assassinations to a minimum. I know it's becoming commonplace here in the town of Hempstead. Mr. Town Attorney, can you please confirm we did?
To the best of my knowledge, those amendments were put on the website.
I believe my office put them on the website. Is that correct?
Not prior to the meeting, but anyway, that's what anyway, that it happens at every meeting for different amendments all the time.
Felix, to answer your question.
It wasn't done.
Felix, to answer your question, as was stated by Councilman Ambrosino, these were our amendments. We discussed them. But if you're asking when they were prepared and when we saw them, to my knowledge, it was the same time the supervisor saw them. That's not to say that we didn't know what we were asking our advisors to prepare. We did because, as Mr. Ambrosino said, we asked him to make the changes. So the document itself, to my knowledge, wasn't prepared until the night before, and I didn't see him in that form until the same time as the supervisor got them.
Okay, so
to the best of my knowledge.
Okay, so to that point is
unless it was emailed to me.
Okay, I'll take you at your word for that one. On that point, I've heard it from a lot of you that you don't vote on something you haven't read. And then now you voted on something you didn't read. So, you see the problem that whichever answer...
No, you're wrong, Felix. We voted to put it on for a public hearing, and that's what we're having today.
But also, Felix, not only did we read it, we wrote them.
I understand, but it's supposed to be given to the public prior.
You're not talking about the public. You just stated that we always use the excuse that we're not voting because we haven't read it. Not only did we read it, we wrote it.
He just said he didn't see it until the meeting.
We wrote them.
We didn't adopt them until a vote is taken tonight. They're not adopted. So therefore, the public has had 15 days to consider what was being proposed as amendments to the supervisor's budget for the last 15 days, and we had a hearing at 2:30, and we're having a hearing tonight. I don't think there's any violation of state law. I think we more than exceeded the notice requirement by state law. Is that correct, Mr. Ra?
That is correct.
Thank you.
And then let me just explain also. Now, actually, hold on. I'm actually speaking with all due respect, Mr. Procacci. I'm actually talking. So we all condemn the lack of civility here. You have 5 members who worked diligently for weeks and weeks on this. In a collegial fashion, we worked together to cut taxes. So I'm not sure what the issue is.
I didn't even bring that up. All I'm asking is that when you propose a resolution, this is all I'm saying, and this is what I'm saying is not done, just in this case, but many resolutions that prior to the meeting, that you're supposed to post them on the website if you have one, and you do. And the idea that you didn't post 5 pages on the website the Friday before the Monday meeting, or at least the Thursday before the Monday meeting, is wrong, because you should have been done. You set the date of the Monday meeting. You should have had the resolutions done. You did the work. Why did you set a date when you couldn't provide the resolutions to the public prior to the meeting? If you couldn't make the date, you set the date of the 15th. I don't understand the problem of doing it.
But Felix, we were calling the public hearing. We weren't voting on the actual items. We were voting to call the public hearing, which is today.
When did you
Mr. Rock, can you correct me if I'm wrong?
You're correct.
Thank you.
Mr. Procacci, let me ask you a question. When did you see the supervisor's budget?
When,
When did you see that on the website?
28th of September, I think?
Okay, how many days was that before we got it? We received it? Before we had it, before you were here? How many days in advance did you have it?
Yeah, you have Friday to Tuesday, right?
How many days was that?
4.
And was that Saturday and Sunday as what?
Saturday, Sunday is the weekend.
Okay. How many business days were there in between?
4.
No, one business day.
Business days, yeah, one business.
One.
That's, I wish all those years when this is the way it's been done since forever, since you've probably been here under Kate Murray and Santino, they've only done 4 days, and no one ever said anything. I wish there was more notice on that.
We always had it.
Document.
We always had, he would give it to us one meeting, and then the next meeting is when we would discuss it. So you had at least 5, 6, 7 days before it came to us. This time we had it one business day.
It's always been that way since I remember, but anyway. On the Receiver of Taxes Office, I see that $600,000 is being cut. Are those like unnecessary salaries that are being lost completely, or are they being transferred to other departments?
Can you answer Mr. Procacci's question, Mr. Conroy?
Just give me a moment just to get to that tab, please. Receiver of taxes, full-time positions budgeted in the 18 budget was 46, in the 19 budget is 41. And we have one termination, it looks like 4 retirements, total of 5, reduction in 19 versus 18.
Okay. You interrupted me during my meeting. I just want to make one statement. What I would do if I had a choice in this matter, instead of doing the tax cut now, and since there are many people who complain about the roads and we have to borrow money to fix the roads, if we don't do the tax cut at this meeting and we just go ahead with what the supervisor proposed, and we end up whatever windfall we happen to have next year when we budget again, we take that money, if it's $10 million, $11 million, and we pave 11 miles of roadway into town, I think the residents would really like that, because we always have a problem with that, and if the interest rates go up, it'll be beneficial to use it to just pay in cash as opposed to borrowing the money. That's what I would do to, alleviate this situation.
Thank you, Mr.
As opposed
Procacci.
to hoping for the best, because you never know what's going to happen. Whatever the windfall is, give it back to the residents in the form of their roadways being fixed.
Thank you, Mr. Procacci. Mita Meriday?
Just one last thing, Mr. Procacci. You have a right to not be happy with the process. You don't have to be happy with the process. That's what it is, okay? But what I'm upset about is the supervisor calling us corrupt and not apologizing, 1, or 2, withdrawing that comment, and it still sticks to my claw, and then she wants us to work with her diligently, yet she's calling us corrupt and never ever saying, my apologies, I didn't mean that the way it sounded. Or, I withdraw that statement, let's work together. No, none of that. So you're right by not being happy with the process, and I think I'm right by expecting an apology or withdrawal of that statement. Thank you, Felix, for your input.
I need to respond to Mr. Dunn now.
Okay, Felix.
The resolutions that you put forth that change the meeting rules, which goes against, and I read large sections of Robert Rules of Order, violate Robert Rules of Order, the tabling indefinitely and all that other nonsense that you put forth, that violates a century of research done by many people, that you bypassed that. Maybe I personally feel that by passing that kind of resolutions that table things indefinitely and stop the discussion by the minority did corrupt the legislative process, and the way the budget process was handled did corrupt the budget process. Now, you could
Okay, Mr. Procacci, you got to wrap it up.
those people are corrupt or not is another thing. I can't speak.
Okay, Felix, you have to, Mr. Procacci, you have to wrap it up. Ms. Meriday.
Meta J. Meriday, Baldwin resident. Unfortunately, I was, among those that did not get the hard copy, and I've been out of town, so I'll just let whatever I would probably say with regard to that. I just have questions with regard to the veteran component, because I'm completely confused. I see on page 85 that there's still the line item with regard to the Veteran Affairs Counselor. Needless to say, looking at the overall breakdown of the budget where you have contingency listed and veteran meeting room listed, and we still don't have a specific line for veteran services, I don't have to speak to the atrocity of that. I see that we have, and I would like an answer to that question.
Mr. Conroy, we have a line for veteran services, do we not?
We do, on page 85, as you refer to,
Yes.
if you go about the middle of the page, there are 2 added positions for Veterans Affairs, a director and a deputy director.
Okay, but there are already 2 people there. What's the difference?
Are you talking about the proposal that we're making to hire 2 professionals to address the substance abuse problem in the town of Hempstead, the suicide problem in the town of Hempstead, and marry those 2 together with some of the issues that you raised concerning the veterans?
I don't know. That's what I'm trying to get.
Yeah, let me explain that to you. I think that's a very fair question. And by the way, we do hear you up here. We don't always have to agree with you, but we do hear you. In this circumstance, we took a lot of the comments that you had, along with other residents, with respect to the fact that perhaps we could do more for our veterans. And one of the things we also talked about was that we could do more with regard to substance abuse, especially among young people. There is an opioid crisis as well as other harmful substances. And we determined that we needed to have at least one person with a director who had experience in counseling, in issues regarding substance abuse, on issues regarding education, with issues regarding suicide prevention, identifying factors that may indicate that a person, whether it be a young person or a veteran, might be prone to hurt themselves. And we made a determination that we were going to have someone at the town level, because this is a town of over 750,000 people, and a lot of the comments that you made, we took into consideration, that we needed somebody to coordinate so that when somebody called us here in the town, that we had somebody who was experienced and qualified to refer them to the many resources that we have in the county, whether it be run by the county, the state, or by a not-for-profit. So that is something that will be included if this budget passes, so that we have someone who's qualified and experienced to do this.
And now we're back to which budget are we talking about? Are we talking about a budget that has
2019 budget?
Because looking at some of the, I guess, the amendments and looking at this budget, all of your amendments, I gather, were not incorporated in this. And again, I cannot speak enough. If you've heard me, I still haven't heard anything about the business development component. If we provided the jobs, if we address the fact that veterans prefer to work with other veterans, 85%, but less than 10% of veteran businesses nationwide have the capacity to hire another veteran, we could address that issue. I didn't hear anything about addressing the foreclosure problem. We have veterans that are living in fear in their homes. They haven't gotten to the substance abuse point yet, but the stresses that are driving them to that. So we're still not being proactive. I don't even want to get on the county issue. I was just at the county hearings yesterday where they're finally just coming aware that they need to do something to revise or review or to update or to implement some type of program that focuses on veteran business development and minority and women business development. Again, something that the town doesn't have. And let's not even talk about the state. The Attorney General, the New York State Controller, Tom DiNapoli, just submitted a scathing report and audit of the governor's program through the Empire State Development, specifically addressing the issues that are within the Minority and Women Business Development Program. So it's non-existent on the town level, non-existent on the county level, and it's problematic on the state level. So veterans, minorities, and women in business who pay taxes, who have served this country, black women are the largest growing constituency in the military. And they're still hidden figures in this society and in the military. So you still have not heard me. So I am still asking the question, what is going to be in place in 2019 for veterans as it pertains to business development, job creation, and support services specifically to veterans, not somebody peeled off from here or snatched from there or borrowed from here. What is being done?
My understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong, and Joe Rock, correct me if I'm wrong, is that we do have targets that we try to meet with respect to women and minority-owned businesses and veterans.
Not on your books yet.
In our contracts.
Through planning and economic development, we do that.
And if that's not sufficient, we'll take.
Language is not there
If
for
it
us,
if it's not sufficient, Ms. Meriday, we will look at that because your points are valid with respect to the veterans.
And the hearings have not even taken place for the township with regard to veterans, because I was already asked about the proposed initiatives that would be on the hearings for November post this session. So I already know that's not a fact. Okay, irregardless of that.
Can
I
I
wanna
just
get
address
past my
that
time.
for a second, just real quickly?
Okay.
It's not on your time. Your clock has stopped.
Oh, I'm watching. Go ahead.
Okay. Okay, as you know, I'm very passionate about the opiate and the vaping and the hookah bars and all of that. That's really very important to me. And you know that veterans have a problem. They come home, they're wounded, they're not the same person who left, whether it be mom or dad. And the kids react to it. Not only the husband or the spouse, but the spouse, husband or wife. The wife sometimes a helicopter pilot, and they get shot up at, and they lose a leg, or some of them lose 2 legs, and they come home, that's not the woman I married, there's marital problems. Those things have to be addressed. This, I believe, is going to partially address that, help them get into an area where the family can be kept together. The opiate problem is something that's terrible. Vaping is like a gateway to it, so we're trying to attack the vaping every which way we can legally, and that's what we're doing, and I think we're showing some progress. The Department of Occupational Resources has, they teach not only veterans, but every person how to do their resumes, how to work a computer if they don't know how to, they don't have any computer skills, how to get a job, try to help them get jobs. But the veteran-owned businesses is something that we got to keep track of. So when you do come up, we can say, what's going on with the veteran-owned businesses? How many contracts did they get? How many veteran-owned businesses are working here in the town of Hempstead? So you know what? Maybe a tracking device is what we're going to have to put into place. And I'm glad you came up and mentioned that, because I'm going to look into it and see what we can do.
Well, I have been mentioning that, and if you're aware, or you may not remember, you voted 2 years ago when you were a county legislator in a 19-0 with regard to the Veteran-Owned Business Act that I developed the legislation for, that on the county level still has no funding, no resources, and no mandate. So the county has been in violation for a number of years. The town is consistent in its lack of diversity and outreach and developing its own. How can you incorporate veteran-owned businesses and minority and women-owned businesses when you don't even have a listing or the outreach to do it themselves? But you want to, again, keep putting the veteran component into the let's address the opioid issue, when the majority of the veterans, even in the township, are older veterans who are in jeopardy of losing their home. So let's get the reality check. Let's start there. My other issue before I run out of time.
State and federal laws with regards to the veteran.
As I said, the controller has already addressed the challenge of the governor, and I would love for Newsday to actually post a real story that focuses on the challenges that minority and women businesses are facing right here in this township and this county. But I also want to say that the other reason that I wanted to be here.
That the town or county is not in compliance. The state controller, Tom DiNapoli, did not say that we are not in compliance.
I didn't say he did.
Okay.
I said I was told that you're going to be looking at projects focused from the state level, and the state is already problematic. And the county is still trying to figure it out. They said that as late as yesterday. Lastly, you are talking about a variety of things, and we have numerous residents in the audience who have been here, and there's one representing a group in particular in your district Councilman Blakeman, when we talk about the previous administration, as far as developers and properties, because there are property developers that are trying to provide jobs and opportunities who cannot seem to get on this calendar and this agenda, and that's problematic, particularly if we're spending all this money and we're talking about all these resources and talking about creating jobs and keep people here in the township. We need to make sure that there is diversity, because I come here, as you all know, and you see all of these large, well-attended, well-lawyered up organizations that provide development, but they're not providing jobs, they're not incorporating local residents, and you have residents that have had projects sitting on the waiting list. And I know you need me to get up, but I'm just going to finish my statement. And as someone said earlier, you're waiting for apology, Councilman Dunn, I'm waiting for an apology from less than a year ago, having one of the individuals sitting in front of me who was going to have 4 public safety officials put me out for exercising my freedom of speech. So I am going to finish my statement.
Well,
if anybody wants to give me that apology, I will accept that apology. But we have residents who come here, take the time out of their lives with the taxes that we have to pay to have their opportunities put on the agenda. And we are looking for you as the leader of the township to at least fulfill those promises that you made to those voices that were stilled under the previous administration.
Thank you.
I will now take my seat.
Thank you.
I would let you know that on this past Thursday, we did have a job fair. We specifically targeted veterans, and they did come. So you were out of town, but we had it this past Thursday at Kennedy Park. And you, if it's budget passed, as it should, we will have something special that has been designed for veterans.
Mike Fichtelman? Mr. Fichtelman, are you still here? Mary Ellen Cray?
About to say she wasn't here. Boy, she sat so long, she's having a problem getting up.
Mary Ellen Cray, 436 Locust Avenue, Uniondale. On the highway budget, page 115, I see a maintenance of equipment amount of $25,000. Am I reading it wrong? 115. I mean, we have a small business. I know that we spend a lot of money on maintenance of equipment. I cannot imagine, this is under snow removal, I believe.
Do you see in the line item, Mr. Conroy?
It's, just give me 1 second to get to that page, please.
So it's the fourth item down?
Ms. Cray, you're on highway, right?
Correct. Highway, number 4, snow removal, building maintenance, shop maintenance.
Yeah, this is maintenance of equipment, has nothing to do with vehicles. It's primarily driven by the age of the equipment.
I see. And where would I find the maintenance of equipment in general?
That'd be page 114, count 4550. Thanks, Mike.
Okay. Machinery repairs, is that
That's it.
$1 million? That's more like it. Thank you.
Yes.
Where would I find the animal behaviorist on the animal shelter, page 92?
That'd be account.
Look down there, I could not find.
It's in fees and services. We spoke about it earlier. It's account 4151.
So it's not on page 92, 93.
It's on page 55.
55, okay, I'll check it out. And it's under fees?
Fees and services, account 4151.
Ms. Cray, that's because it's a contract. It's not a salaried employee.
Thank you. Receiver of taxes, page 79. I see that there was a confidential assistant to the receiver of taxes at an amount this year of $203,405, but it was not replaced. Maybe you can fill me in on that.
What was the title again, ma'am?
It's the confidential assistant to the receiver of taxes. It's Mr. Deary.
Yes, Mr. Deary intends to retire at the end of the year.
I see. And so is there no confidential assistant in the future?
None is planned in this budget, no.
I see, but it was necessary to have one in the past budget, right? Which the majority did vote for, right? Am I right?
You are correct.
Yes.
So it's no place else in the budget, right? That's just been removed. Okay, page 169, Uniondale Fire Protection District. Who has the contract for that?
You know who has that?
Rod, do you know who has that contract?
I believe it's Westbury, the
I
Westbury.
think it is Westbury.
It's Westbury.
And is it again being put out to bid?
I think it was put out to bid a year ago, and I think they signed a 2 or 3 year contract. Uniondale Fire Department did not bid on it, if that's where you're going with it. Uniondale did not put in a bid.
Because Uniondale feels that it should be under our fire department as of right, not something for the town of Hempstead to be putting out. I'm concerned about the 3 brochures that are going to be canceled. Is that correct? From the Department of Parks? It's up there.
Oh, yeah.
Wait 15 seconds, it'll come up. How $222,493 is going to be saved by not giving us an opportunity to know what the offerings of the Parks Department classes will be. Is that correct?
That's correct under the amendments to the budget.
Does that make sense? Would somebody please give me a rationale for that?
All I can say, Ms. Cray, is when I got into office, I wanted to dramatically reduce the amount of spending that the town of Hempstead spent on mail. Since I've been in office, we've saved almost $400,000 or a little over $400,000 in mail. And one of the things we did with the parks notices that went out, whereas they used to send separate notices for every event, we tried to consolidate to save costs to taxpayers. We've tried to be as frugal as we can with the mail that we send out, balancing that against the consumers, or the residents rather, interest in getting notices of events. Some of it has worked. I got someone who complained to me at the 9/11 ceremony that they didn't get a notice reminding them about the 9/11 ceremony. So it's trial and error. We tried to consolidate them further again and put like 3 events on one mailer just to save money instead of sending out separate mailers. But the amendments cut the mail even further on these events.
I don't think it's very frugal practices spending $55,000 on a mailing about budget meetings that get to homes after the meetings even occur. So if we're going to talk about cutting down on mailings, let's talk about really cutting down on mailings.
I believe I really have cut down on mailings.
Except for the $55,000 one that got to houses after the budget meetings.
I think it's important to let the residents know what's going on with the budget.
After the meeting?
It's also available online.
Okay, let's go back to the Department of Parks and Recreation, the listings of the classes which are available. These are being cut, and how will we know what the classes will be? I mean, I take a number of classes.
Well, I think the pamphlets will still be printed, and they will be available in all of our parks, all of our office buildings, our senior centers, everywhere that they are normally, they will be available.
They're also going to be.
and available online. I'm sorry.
This is a savings totally relating to postage.
Correct.
Postage and reproduction for about 450,000. It's 450? Is that the exact number?
In other words, you're going to print them. They will be printed and placed in the areas where you can get them.
They will be printed, but they will not be sent to every home. Okay. So then there's also the annual calendar, which has the town board meetings and things like that. That is going to be also removed.
And available online. I mean, for the savings of hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Okay, let's go to the Office of Tourism. I could not figure out the monthly Office of Tourism pamphlets that are put out. All I can see are $46,500 for advertising and promotion and $5,000 for printing. That does not seem to compute for the brochures that go out every single month indicating events.
Ms. Cray, are you on a certain page? I'm sorry. 59?
Yeah, I think it's 59.
Mr. Conroy, can you address that?
Yeah, we're looking, the budget amount, Ms. Craig, is $46,500.
That's what I see for advertising and promotion.
Right, and under that would be TV ads, pamphlets, Cablevision, and I Love New York Guide. That's what those dollars will be spent on.
However, what about this monthly item? It comes out every single month in, it's sent to libraries, it's sent to organizations, sent to schools, and I cannot believe that $46,500 or that the printing of $5,000 would cover that. It's got to be someplace else.
Yeah, I think it's two different items. I think what you're currently referring to is something that would come out of the Parks Department budget, not tourism. Yeah,
Interesting. Because it has things from libraries, it does not include things from the town. It's things from libraries and organizations and items of that type. We'll have to discuss that.
All right. Okay.
What is longevity? What is longevity? I see that under Office of Tourism, it's $2,575, I guess. But for another, the longevity is $41,650.
I'm sorry. I think it's based upon the amount of employees in the department. So obviously a smaller department like tourism, the longevity that employees would accrue over that year would be less than a department of, say, highways or sanitation with hundreds of employees. Mr. Conroy?
Yes, what longevity is, it was negotiated way back in a collective bargaining agreement. When an employee meets a tenure with the town, 10 years, 15 years, and 20 years, there's a stipend paid to that employee once they meet that criteria. And as Councilman D'Esposito alludes to, is that when you have a particular department with not so many employees, longevity is not going to be a big number. But like the Parks Department, where you have many employees, it's going to be quite larger. So again, it's all about tenure with the town, 10, 15, and 20 years, stipend paid on an annual basis.
Thank you.
Sure.
Where are the EMTs?
They've moved to Conservation and Waterways.
Waterways. So it relates to things on the water or the beaches and things like that?
They were moved from Parks to Conservation and Waterways. Is that right, Mr. Conroy?
That's correct.
Yeah, the original reason why they were moved from parks to conservation and waterways is because the Bay Constables assist in the maintenance and providing the schedule of maintenance for the AEDs in the town of Hempstead.
Thank you.
Bill McCabe?
Why does the Bill McCabe, Floral Park, New York.
Why does the Department of General Services need a Director of Communications at almost $160,000 a year, and what does he or she do?
Yeah, the Director of Communication is not for General Services. The Director of Communications is a town-wide position with their salary paid out of General Services.
The Director of Communications has historically been under the Supervisor's office, but it was moved in this budget to the Department of General Services, out of my office to the Department of General Services.
And just for purposes of clarification, the person that had been proposed to be the head of communications was involved in directly criticizing all the members of the town board. So we did not feel it was prudent to go forward with that person and that agenda. So we thought it was more appropriate to bring the person under general services so they could work for the entire town board.
Director of Communications always worked for the entire town. That was always their role. And the person that the councilwoman's referring to actually was voted down. So we were looking for a new Director of Communications.
Because the former Director of Communications respected everyone on the town board.
I wasn't trying to bring up all of this by asking.
No, but that's the reason. That's a genuine reason, because we wanted someone who would work for the entire town board. That's all. If there was another way to achieve it, then that would be great. But that was the goal.
Thank you.
Okay. Madam Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Councilman Ambrosino? Aye. Councilman Blakeman?
Wait, are we calling the roll or the adoption?
I'm sorry, may I have a motion to close the public hearing?
So moved.
Second.
Hold on. Are you going to adopt the budget?
And adopt the budget.
Yes.
Okay, so close it and adopt the budget.
I'd like to make a motion to close the public hearing and adopt the tax cut budget.
Second.
Councilman Ambrosino? Aye. Councilman Blakeman? Aye. Councilman Diaz-Bazito?
Aye.
Councilman Dunn?
Aye.
Councilwoman King Sweeney?
Aye.
Senior Councilwoman Gooseby? Supervisor Gillen?
As I said earlier today when we opened up this budget hearing, I believe budgets are about more than just numbers on a page and just about cutting and spending. It's about the kind of future we want for ourselves and for our families. While the council and I agree on some changes, such as an Office of Veterans Affairs and Public Health, there are still some items we do not agree upon. I'm very proud that over 95% of this budget has remained intact from what I initially proposed. After the preliminary budget was introduced, I made an attempt to discuss changes that could be agreed upon by all of us, but that request fell on deaf ears. I proposed amendments that would lower taxes while being honest and transparent in how we deliver services, and they chose not to support me. Since taking office, I've been asking questions, challenging the status quo here in Hempstead, and making sure that you, the residents, are heard, and it's making a difference. Things are changing. The town council is engaged in a way they have never shown before, and it's good for our town. I will continue to ask the tough questions, challenge things that need to be challenged, and fight for our residents. Since 2003, 7 of the last 8 non-election year budgets all included tax hikes. In each case, the town board unanimously raised everyone's taxes without controversy or without even a word. These tax hikes on average out to an increase of over 5% in each of those years. The budget you see before you today would not be the way it is if I was not here challenging the status quo in this non-election year. This is why I believe debate, any debate, is not only healthy, but is required for an issue as large and as all-encompassing as our budget. I am not convinced, however, that gambling tax cuts on the backs of potential employee retirements is fiscally prudent or sound. In fact, I think it's reckless and irresponsible. The council has not presented, in my opinion, any kind of realistic or structurally sound plan to replace essential town employees once they retire. The council has also not budgeted money for these potential retiring employees' contractually obligated separation pay. So the only way to pay out these individuals would be, conceivably, to borrow money and then count the borrowed money as revenue, or even worse, take the money from our surplus and potentially injure our bond rating. I believe we can pay for tax cuts and still have enough money to make every employee whole without borrowing, as well as being able to make responsible decisions on positions that can be eliminated. The council is also assuming through this budget plan that these retiring employees, who we don't even know who they are yet, do not need to be replaced. Replacements aren't budgeted anywhere. I will operate this town under the constraints presented to me by this board, and I hope that services to taxpayers can remain as steady as possible. And I will work starting today on a management plan that relates to this budget so that by this time next year, our town will not be falling into crisis. I vote no.
I would like to respond to that.
May I have a motion to adjourn?
I'd like to respond to it before the motion to adjourn. Supervisor, here's where the disconnect is. You know, we had hearings, we listened to all the evidence, we had lots of meetings. We have a disagreement. And the disagreement affects less than 2% of the budget. Our disagreement is minimal compared to the entirety of the budget. Yet again, you characterize the 6 members on this board as being irresponsible. You know, that is not helpful. And when you complain that the board doesn't work with you, that could be the reason. Can't we just agree to disagree, not call names, and not call people irresponsible because they disagree on less than 2% of what you proposed? That's all it is. And you even agreed to some of the amendments that we made. So we disagree on the tax cut. We wanted to give a tax cut. We felt it was prudent. You didn't want to. Can't we just leave it at that and not call your colleagues irresponsible? Because that is really what grates on all of us, and that's why you've had a hard time working with all of us. And I think me, for one, of all the people on this board, have given you more than enough leeway to try to work together. I started trying to work together day one, but it's the same old thing. If there's a disagreement over policy, there's name calling. We shouldn't do that. And I want to say one last thing. In my religion, the new year, you're supposed to apologize to people, even if you think that you were right, if they think that they deserve an apology. I would like to think that going forward, let's think of this as a new year. Let's go forward and let's forget about the past and let's stop the name calling and stop the rancor when we disagree. Can't we agree to disagree? That's democracy. Not name calling if someone doesn't vote the way you want or doesn't agree with your policy. So I respect your position in voting no. I wish you would respect ours.
No, I would like to say something as well. Now, you and I are from the same party, but it doesn't matter to me when it comes to voting for all of the residents in this town. I love this town. I work very hard to get to where we are. And you have said some things to me and done some things to me that were very disrespectful. And I would like for you to stop it because that's not the way we are. You are a mother. And you're sitting here, we don't have a chief executive. I want you to know that. As far as town government is concerned, we're all one because we all have one vote. And let's, from this day on, go and do what we're supposed to. Please don't come up with any more of those nice things that you think are nice that are not nice to us. And we need to do, because you know, you sued us all. Even me, when I voted with you, you still put a lawsuit on me, and I won't forget that. Okay, and I won't forget what you did to me with some of the staff and some of the people that come here. We do have councilmanic districts, and they must be respected. We each have our own districts that we are responsible for. You were voted townwide because when we really had this lawsuit, we didn't know what to do with the supervisor. But the supervisor works full-time. We work part-time. As I work 40 hours a week or more for what I make, which is nothing. So I would appreciate it if we all respect each other. I respect them. I've worked also on this budget, and I do have a degree in business administration. And I have an idea what it is. And to me, it's so important that our residents have a break. We're getting hit, all of us. Our homes are being reassessed, so we're going to have to pay money with that. With what happened with the new administration, we're going to pay more money on our tax with that. So if we don't need to do that, would you please Let's all forget and just work as one, because that's why we're sitting here. I really would appreciate it.
I would appreciate that as well, Senior Councilwoman. Madam Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Did we call the roll already? We did call the roll now. Oh, we didn't? Motion to adjourn. I'm doing that. Okay.
Councilman Ambrosino. Councilman Blakeman. Councilman Diaz-Bazito. Councilman Dunn. Councilwoman King Sweeney. Senior Councilwoman Gooseby.
Aye.
Supervisor Gillen.
Aye.